The galaxy had long feared human soldiers. Entire fleets spoke of Earth's warriors as unstoppable, brutal, and unyielding. But the galaxy believed it had already seen the worst of humanity, until whispers spread of something even darker, something no one wanted to believe existed. The chamber of the Galactic Council was vast, stretching wider than some planetary capitals. Towering pillars of light reached upward into a ceiling of swirling holographic stars. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy sat in their floating chairs, their voices overlapping in sharp, tense tones. The subject on this day was one word, a word that had silenced empires, a word that made even ancient species lower their voices when spoken aloud. Humans. For centuries, humanity had been a name to fear, not because they controlled the galaxy with countless fleets, not because their numbers were greater than other races, but because, whenever they fought, they won. No matter the odds, no matter the enemy, no matter the war. The first speaker, a scaled delegate from the Zilth Dominion, slammed his clawed hand against his console. His voice shook with anger, but beneath it, fear. We cannot allow this to continue. Every conflict, every rebellion, every border war ends the same. If humans are present, their side wins. This is not chance, this is not strategy, this is something unnatural. A ripple of agreement passed through the chamber. The Morkari representative, whose species had fought humans more than once, hissed in disgust. You call it unnatural. I call it monstrous. We sent 5 legions to break their defenses on Drell Prime. Do you know what returned? 1 broken ship. 1! And even then, the survivors screamed of human fire teams cutting through armies like predators among cattle. The chamber stirred uneasily. Everyone knew the stories. Stories of humans fighting in storms, in deserts, in frozen wastelands where no other species could even breathe. Stories of humans eating their own rations raw, marching day and night without stopping, pushing forward long after alien soldiers would have collapsed. Stories of human victories that made no sense. But today, something new had entered the Council's records. At the center of the chamber, the Grand Archivist activated a hologram. Lines of text and blurry images filled the air. These are not confirmed, the archivist said carefully, but the reports have multiplied. The humans may have another division. Soldiers beyond the ones we already know. The chamber erupted in noise. Impossible. Exaggerations. Humans barely control their own fleets. Why would they hide such forces? The archivist raised a trembling hand. They call them special forces. The words lingered in the air, carrying a weight no one expected. The hologram shifted, displaying fragments of intercepted transmissions, distorted images captured in battle zones, and the written testimony of alien commanders. The first record showed an entire fortress, defended by 1 million soldiers, reduced to silence in less than 3 nights. No ships had been detected entering or leaving. No armies had marched across the land, yet every defense was destroyed from within. The second record showed blurred figures moving faster than cameras could track, cutting through armored soldiers. With brutal precision, the third was only a sound file. A voice, broken and terrified, whispering through static. They weren't soldiers. They weren't even human. They were shadows. Shadows with human eyes, the delegates argued. Some dismissed the reports as lies, human propaganda designed to frighten their enemies. Others said the stories were too consistent, too widespread, to be fabrications. The Nyrak speaker, a creature of glassy skin and glowing veins, spoke with a voice like shattered crystal. Do not dismiss this. We believed we knew the worst of humans, but history shows us we never see their full hand until it is too late. They fight like no other. If these special forces exist, then what we have faced so far were only their regulars. The word regulars sent a shiver through the chamber. If the warriors who had crushed empires were only the baseline, then what were the ones Earth kept hidden? At the far edge of the chamber, a prisoner sat in chains of light. His body bore the scars of recent battle, claws torn, armor shredded. He was the commander of the Val Dominion's 7th Fleet, one of the few survivors of a failed campaign against human colonies. The council had summoned him to testify. The prisoner's voice was hoarse, but strong enough to carry across the chamber. "You want the truth? I saw them." The delegates leaned forward. "Not soldiers, not an army, ghosts. We fought their regular humans. They were brutal enough. But then the air grew silent. My men screamed, and something tore through them. They moved faster than thought. They broke machines with their bare hands. They fought without fear, without hesitation. Do you understand? They enjoyed it." The council chamber froze. Even those who mocked the reports could not ignore the terror in the commander's eyes. He looked at the assembly with a kind of desperate fury. "You think the humans have shown you their worst? No. They've been holding back those shadows. They are the blade humanity keeps hidden, and when they choose to draw it, no one will stop them." Still, not every delegate believed. A bloated representative of the Thrun Collective laughed openly. "Ridiculous. Shadows with human eyes, faster than thought. You let fear cloud your reason. These stories are human tricks. They want us to tremble before armies that do not exist." Others nodded in agreement, but their laughter was uneasy, forced, because deep down, even the skeptics remembered the strange disappearances, the silent battlefields, the fortresses that fell without a trace of invasion. Beyond the chamber, across the galaxy, whispers spread, whispers in the taverns of frontier worlds, whispers in the barracks of alien armies, whispers in the throne rooms of empires. Special forces. Some said they were cybernetic monsters, built from human soldiers and enhanced with forbidden technology. Some said they were Death World hunters, trained in Earth's deadliest places where even machines could not survive. Others swore they were not human at all, but something darker, something Earth had discovered, tamed, and unleashed. No one knew the truth. And that was worse than knowing, because fear grew strongest in the dark. The Galactic Council ended the session in chaos. Half the members demanded immediate military build-up to prepare for a human strike. Others argued that provoking Earth would be suicide. A smaller group whispered that maybe, just maybe, it was already too late. The Grand Archivist closed the session with a single line, spoken in a trembling voice that carried through every ear in the chamber. "We feared human soldiers, and yet we may have only seen the shadows at the edge of their fire. In the days that followed, fleets prepared in silence, armies drilled, citizens whispered, and somewhere on a distant world, unseen eyes watched the galaxy's panic with quiet satisfaction, because the whispers were true. The special forces were real, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The galaxy held its breath the day the first true sighting was reported. It began like so many other skirmishes, an alien fleet, confident and arrogant, intercepting what they thought was a vulnerable human convoy. Dozens of ships moved into position, their commanders certain of victory. After all, the humans were outnumbered 10-1. On every record, on every tactical screen, it looked like a simple raid. Another chance to prove that Earth's reputation was nothing more than exaggerated fear. The alien admiral gave his order with a tone of triumph already in his voice. His cruisers cut across the convoy's path, weapons locked, ready to fire. But then, something unexpected happened. The human transports did not scatter. They did not attempt to flee, nor did they rush into formation for a desperate defense. Instead, they slowed, almost calmly, as if waiting. The alien crews laughed at the hesitation. It seemed so foolish, so unlike the brutal efficiency humans were known for. But then, the laughter died. One by one, the human transports opened, And what emerged was not the typical ranks of human marines or armored soldiers. What stepped out was something else entirely. The recordings captured only fragments, black armored figures moving with unnatural precision, shapes that seemed to vanish into the dark of space, only to reappear within enemy ships. Blurs of motion that cut through armored corridors before alarms even had time to sound. No fleet. Sensors registered their entry. No cameras managed to lock onto them for more than a second. But the screams over the comms told the story better than any image could. The first alien ship went silent within minutes. The second followed soon after, systems shutting down as though a phantom hand had pulled the life out of them. Then came the desperate messages. They are inside our walls, shadows with human voices. They don't fight like soldiers, they hunt. The words spread across the fleet, and fear spread faster than the attackers themselves. The admiral tried to rally his forces, but panic had already rooted itself deep in the hearts of his crews. Entire crews abandoned weapons and control stations, fleeing into sealed compartments that would not protect them. The shadows broke through regardless. Some ships self-destructed before the enemy could reach them, the crews preferring death to whatever waited for them in the dark corridors. A single transmission made it through, carried on a scrambled channel. Before it too was cut off. The voice was shrill, panicked, cracking under the weight of terror. They're not soldiers, they're predators. They enjoy this. And then only static. The Council received these transmissions days later. The chamber fell into silence as the recordings were played again and again. The blurred images, the shadows in black armor, the unnatural efficiency, it was undeniable. This was no trick, no propaganda, no whispered rumor. Something new had emerged from humanity's ranks, something more terrifying than the galaxy had ever imagined, delegates argued. But none could ignore the truth of the recordings. Some demanded the humans be confronted immediately, forced to reveal what these things were. Others shouted that provoking them would only bring destruction faster, and in every corner of the galaxy, fear spread like wildfire. Soldiers who had once whispered about human ferocity now refused to even utter the name of these new beings. Commanders who once bragged about facing human armies now gave orders to avoid them at all costs. And yet, behind all the fear, behind the debates and the panic, one truth remained clear. This was only the first sighting. The special forces had revealed themselves not in full force, but in fragments, just enough to remind the galaxy of its own weakness, just enough to spread terror, just enough to make the entire galaxy wonder. What else humanity had been hiding all this time? For the first time in living memory, the galaxy realized that the regular soldiers of Earth, the ones already feared, already unbeatable, were not the true edge of the blade. They had only been the warning. The true weapon had just stepped out of the shadows, and the galaxy was not ready. The human transports closed their bays, engines burning bright as they vanished back into the stars. They left nothing behind but wreckage, empty hulks drifting silently in space, and a trail of silence that echoed louder than any victory song. The Council played the last recording one more time before sealing it in restricted archives. The voice of the dying alien commander repeated across the chamber like a curse. They're not soldiers, they're predators. And in that moment, the galaxy understood the terrible truth. The humans had always been dangerous, but the special forces were something else entirely, something born not to fight wars, but to end them. The council chamber was packed beyond capacity. Delegates who had ignored earlier warnings now crowded into the hall, their voices sharp with fear and suspicion. The images from the destroyed fleet, the blurred shadows, the screams, the final transmission had shaken even the most arrogant empires. This was no longer rumor. The galaxy had seen something it could not explain, and the galaxy wanted answers. At the center of the chamber stood the human envoy, Ambassador Reeve. He was calm, almost unnervingly so. While alien leaders hissed, shouted, and demanded explanations, Reeves' expression never shifted from a slight, controlled smile. His eyes scanned the chamber the way a predator might study a herd. The first to speak was the Grand Archivist, his voice trembling as he raised the holographic recordings once again. Ambassador Reeve, 3 cycles ago, an entire fleet was annihilated under mysterious circumstances. The survivors spoke of beings, black-armored humans, moving faster than thought, striking from the shadows. Do you deny this? Reeve adjusted the cuff of his uniform, then clasped his hands behind his back. I am afraid I don't know what you mean. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted, some pounding their consoles, others screaming insults in their native tongues. The archivist slammed his staff of light against the floor, restoring order with a thunderous echo. The recordings are clear, the archivist insisted. We have seen these soldiers. We have heard their voices. They are not regular human troops. What are they? Reeve tilted his head slightly as though listening to a faint sound far away. Then he spoke again. The galaxy has always exaggerated human strength. If your fleet fell, perhaps it was due to poor planning. Or perhaps you simply faced ordinary human soldiers, doing what they do best. Shadows and myths, I believe you are letting your fear create monsters where none exist. The chamber grew tense. His words were calm, measured, even dismissive, but it was the very calmness that terrified the Council. If these special forces did not exist, why did the human ambassador not deny them outright? Why speak with riddles, with smiles, with such certainty? The Varkian representative, scarred from the war his people had lost to humanity, leaned forward. You mock us. We know what we saw. Your regular humans already destroy fleets larger than their own, but these were not regulars. What are they? Ambassador Reeves' smile widened only slightly. What you saw is what you believe you saw. Nothing more. The words sent a shiver through the chamber. The denial was not a denial at all. It was worse. It left space for doubt, for fear, for imagination to fill the gaps, and fear was always strongest when it fed on the unknown. One delegate dared to press further. If they do not exist, then why does humanity remain silent in the face of these accusations? Why not prove their non-existence? Reeves' reply was immediate, sharp as a blade. Because humans do not answer to fear. We do not explain away your nightmares. If you see shadows where none stand, perhaps the shadows are of your own making. The chamber erupted once more, but this time the noise was different. It was not just anger, not just outrage. It was fear, disguised as argument. Every delegate could sense it. Humanity had not admitted to anything, but they had not denied it either. Later, in quiet corners of the galaxy, soldiers whispered about the ambassador's words. Some said the humans enjoyed the game, feeding the galaxy's fear. Others swore the denial was part of the plan, to keep everyone guessing, never certain where the truth ended and the nightmare began. Meanwhile, reports continued to spread. Rebel colonies claimed to have seen black-armored humans strike from the darkness to liberate their worlds. Merchant ships vanished, their last messages filled with the same words. Shadows with human eyes. Armies surrendered at the mere rumor that special forces were near, and yet every time the Council confronted humanity, the answer was the same. Calm, cold, denial. On Earth, behind sealed walls and hidden bases, the truth was known only to a few. Training continued in silence. Missions launched without record, victories erased before they could be documented. Humanity's most dangerous weapon remained in the shadows, denied even as their legend grew. The galaxy had feared human soldiers for centuries, but now it feared something far worse, not knowing how deep the shadows went or how many of them waited just beyond the edge of sight. And as Ambassador Reeve departed the chamber that day, his final words echoed in every delegate's mind. If You are afraid of ghosts. Perhaps you should ask why. The war drums of the Dravic Empire echoed across the galaxy. For decades, they had grown in silence, building fleets and weapons in hidden shipyards, watching as the rest of the galaxy bent in quiet fear to the will of humanity. To the Dravic, this was weakness. The other empires had bowed, surrendered, or cowered in council chambers, speaking in hushed tones about shadows with human eyes. But the Dravic were not afraid, or so they claimed. Their emperor declared before billions that he would prove humanity to be mortal. He announced that Earth's reputation was nothing more than smoke and lies, a story whispered by cowards. He promised the galaxy that his empire would face the humans in open battle and that his legions would march over their broken bodies. The galaxy listened in silence, many secretly praying he would succeed, because if he failed, then it meant every nightmare about humanity's special forces was true. The chosen battlefield was the world of Coran Prime, a mineral-rich planet on the edge of human-controlled space. The Dravic landed millions of soldiers, armored divisions and fleets of war machines. Their ships filled the sky, blotting out the sun with steel. Cities were crushed underfoot, the surface reshaped into trenches, walls, and killing fields. They wanted humanity to come. They wanted the fight to be witnessed by the galaxy. When the humans arrived, the Dravic expected fleets of warships, armored regiments, and orbital bombardments. Instead, only a single task force landed. Small transports, carrying only a few hundred soldiers, touched down on the broken plains. The Dravic laughed, their generals declaring that Earth had finally revealed its weakness, but the laughter did not last. The battle began at dusk. The Dravic sent their first waves forward, armored vehicles rolling across the plains, soldiers advancing in endless lines. The human soldiers moved with the discipline the galaxy had come to fear, their rifles cutting through the front ranks with deadly precision. But then, the shadows appeared. At first, the Dravic thought it was smoke or tricks of the light. Figures in black armor moved faster than the eye could follow, striking from angles no one expected. Entire squads vanished in the dark, their screams carrying across comms before falling into silence. Tanks exploded from within, their crews torn apart before they knew they had been breached. The special forces had entered the battlefield. The Dravic's formations collapsed in confusion. They were trained to fight armies, to hold against overwhelming firepower. But this was something else. This was a storm of precision and terror. Human regulars pushed forward like an unstoppable wave, but the shadows of the special forces cut out the heart of the Dravic war machine. Generals found their command bunkers breached, their codes stolen, their own guards dead before they had time to cry for help. In one chilling moment, the Dravic Emperor's personal channel broadcast a desperate plea from one of his most trusted commanders. The feed showed black-armored humans tearing through walls as though they were paper, cutting down soldiers with silent, fluid movements. The commander shouted, "They are not soldiers, they are executioners," before the feed ended in static. The galaxy watched the battle unfold through scattered transmissions. The Dravic fleets in orbit tried to rain fire down on the battlefield, but their systems failed. Codes had been corrupted, shields deactivated without warning, their ships turned against one another, hacked and sabotaged by hands they could not see. The Dravic admirals screamed in disbelief, their proud fleets crumbling before they even faced a proper enemy. By dawn, Coran Prime was silent. What had begun as a battlefield prepared for millions ended as a graveyard. The Dravic armies were gone, their fleets reduced to debris. Only human soldiers remained, walking among the ruins with grim efficiency. The galaxy reeled. What was seen on Coran Prime was no longer rumor, no longer whispered fear. It was undeniable truth. Special. Forces were real. They did not just fight. They dismantled entire empires from within, crushing armies with shadows and silence. In the aftermath, the council gathered once more. No one mocked the reports now. No one dared suggest it was propaganda. Instead, silence hung heavy as they replayed the final transmissions from the battlefield. The words of the Dravik commander, repeated in every chamber, in every home, in every world that dared think of war with humanity. They are not soldiers, they are executioners. The Dravik Empire, once proud and arrogant, was broken in weeks. Their emperor was never seen again. Some claimed he had been captured, others that he had fallen on Koran Prime. Whatever the truth, his empire vanished into the ashes of history, and in the silence that followed, the galaxy began to understand. Human soldiers had always been feared, but the special forces were something beyond war. They were the weapon Earth used when it wanted to end a conflict before it began. And now every empire knew, if they dared challenge humanity, they would not face an army. They would face the shadows. The galaxy was no longer the same after Koran Prime. What had once been rumor, what had once been dismissed as ghost stories and propaganda, had now been shown in terrifying clarity. Entire fleets had collapsed. An empire had fallen, and the galaxy had watched it happen. They had seen the shadows move across the battlefield, seen machines die without warning, seen soldiers vanish into silence. The Dravik Empire had believed themselves strong. They had declared they would stand against humanity, and they had been erased. Their worlds were empty now, their fleets scattered debris, their names spoken only in whispers, and with their destruction came something far worse than fear of human power. Fear of human possibility, because if the special forces were real, then what else was Earth still keeping hidden? It began with whispers. A frontier colony in the Outer Rim awoke one morning to find its garrison gone. No fighting, no battle, no explosions, just silence. The planetary governor surrendered the system to Earth before any demand was made. He claimed he had seen shadows on the horizon at night, figures moving faster than the eye, watching from the hills. No proof was ever found, yet his surrender was accepted. Then came the fleets. The Yasari Alliance assembled 3 full battle groups to blockade a human trade route. They had numbers, firepower, and confidence, but before the fleets even reached their assigned positions, their admirals surrendered. They claimed their ships had been infiltrated before the battle began, that shadows had walked their corridors and whispered into their ears. No one else saw these beings, but the admirals refused to fight. They abandoned their fleets and fled into hiding. In one cycle, entire star systems began bending the knee without a shot fired. Some worlds claimed they saw black-armored figures walking their streets. Others swore their defense codes had been altered overnight, that their weapons turned to dust in their hands. Sometimes it was true, sometimes it was only rumor. But it did not matter. The idea of the special forces was stronger than proof, and everywhere the pattern was the same. When the galaxy believed the special forces were near, courage died. The council was thrown into chaos. Armies that once boasted of their strength now refused to face humans at all. Fleets withdrew at the first sign of a human ship. Even the strongest empires hesitated, unsure if every shadow concealed one of Earth's hidden warriors. Some leaders tried to resist the fear. They stood in their thrones and declared the special forces to be lies. But when their armies refused to march, when their generals resigned, when their citizens whispered that the shadows were already among them, even those leaders fell silent. It was the perfect weapon, fear itself. In one recorded session, a counselor from the Valoran Republic slammed his clawed hand on the table and shouted, "They are winning wars without fighting! Our soldiers surrender before the first shot is fired. Is this what we have become, slaves to shadows?" But no one answered him, because deep down they all knew the truth. Humanity had found a way to fight that no empire could resist, and the humans themselves. They said nothing. Their diplomats sat in silence, smiling politely, denying nothing and confirming nothing. When asked if the special forces were real, they repeated the same calm lines. We do not answer to fear. If you see ghosts, perhaps you should ask why. The galaxy trembled. Entire economies shifted as planets abandoned alliances to join Earth's sphere of influence. Armies melted away, their morale shattered by the thought of black-armored predators waiting in the dark. Generals, who had once fought proudly, now drank in silence, muttering about footsteps in their dreams. The special forces didn't have to appear. They didn't have to move. Their legend was enough. On a distant world, a merchant told the story best. The galaxy feared human soldiers because they never stopped fighting. But now we fear their shadows, because they don't have to fight at all. And in the silence of the void, hidden in places no one dared to search, the special forces watched and waited. They did not need to show themselves. Their work was already being done. Entire civilizations collapsed under the weight of fear alone. The galaxy had entered a new era, an era where the mere whisper of shadows could end a war, an era where humanity ruled without raising a hand. And somewhere in the darkness, a human commander looked out over the stars and said quietly, "This is only the beginning." The galaxy had built legends around the shadows. They told themselves that the human special forces were monsters, bred in secret, machines in flesh, or nightmares given form. The truth, however, was far worse and far simpler. It began with a whisper of stolen documents, a data leak spread across 3 star systems, its origin unknown. What it contained sent shockwaves through every intelligence agency. Files marked with Earth's military seal, reports on training, records of survival tests, and psychological conditioning logs. At first, the galaxy believed the files were fakes, but the more experts studied them, the more undeniable they became. This was not fantasy. This was the truth of human special forces. Unlike other empires, humanity did not select its strongest or its fastest for these elite units. They did not seek the tallest or those born with special genetics. Instead, they searched for something far more dangerous, those who refused to break. The first stage was selection. Candidates were pulled from across Earth's armies. Men and women who had already survived wars, who had fought on death worlds, who had endured scars that would have crippled others. They were given no promises, no rewards, only a chance. Out of thousands, only a handful were accepted. Then came the training. The documents described it in cold detail. Weeks without food, days without water, endless marches through deserts, jungles, and frozen wastelands. Simulations where everything was taken from them, friends, allies, weapons, until all that remained was willpower. Many candidates begged to leave. Some vanished in the process, their names erased. Those who survived grew harder than steel. What unsettled the galaxy most was not the physical pain. It was the psychological torment. The files spoke of nights filled with screaming winds, of illusions crafted to shatter the mind. Candidates were locked in complete isolation, buried alive for days, forced to listen to the voices of their own fears. Artificial intelligence whispered lies to them, telling them they had failed, telling them their comrades were dead, telling them they were forgotten. Only those who could silence the voices, who could stare into the dark and smile, moved forward. By the time the training ended, those who remained were no longer like ordinary soldiers. They had learned to fight in silence, to vanish in plain sight, to survive in places no other species could. They could kill with weapons or with nothing but their bare hands. They could breathe in toxic air, endure poisoned wounds, and keep moving long after their bodies should have failed. One passage from the stolen files horrified the galaxy most. The final test is simple. A candidate must die to be reborn. We bury them in the dirt and leave them with nothing. If they rise again, they are one of us. If they do not, they are forgotten." The galaxy debated endlessly whether this was symbolic or literal, but the meaning was clear. Only those who had stared into death and returned were worthy of the name Special Forces. The revelation spread like wildfire. Armies that had once tried to mock the Special Forces now fell into silence. Commanders who thought the shadows were myths now realized the truth, that Earth had created warriors who were more than flesh and blood. They were willpower made manifest, unyielding, unbroken, unafraid. What terrified the galaxy most was this: humans were already feared as soldiers because of their resilience, their refusal to surrender, their reckless bravery. But if those traits were the foundation, then the Special Forces were the sharpened blade forged from that iron will. One alien general, after reading the leaked files, destroyed his own army's morale with a single speech. He stood before his troops and declared, "We cannot fight them. They train their warriors to die, and those warriors return. How do you defeat an enemy who has already conquered death?" Whispers of the training spread across the stars. Children grew afraid of the dark. Armies refused to face humans even in simulations. Even the most powerful empires realized that their strongest soldiers were no match for the broken and reforged warriors of Earth. And through it all, humanity said nothing. When asked to confirm or deny the leaks, Earth's ambassadors gave only a faint smile. One diplomat leaned forward during a heated council meeting and whispered, "If you think the training files were frightening, you should ask yourself this: what do you think we kept secret?" The chamber fell silent, because everyone knew, if this was what Earth was willing to let slip, the truth must be far worse. And in the shadows of a nameless battlefield, the Special Forces prepared for the next war. Their bodies bore scars that no medical scan could erase. Their minds were iron, and their will was eternal. They were not myths, they were not lies. They were the answer to the galaxy's fear. The galaxy had finally learned the truth of their training, but the truth was not comfort, it was terror, and yet this was still not the end. Because, while the galaxy trembled at the idea of what humans could endure, they had not yet seen what humans would do. The Empire had run out of excuses. For cycles they had told themselves the shadows were lies, propaganda, tricks of war. But now, with every frontier crumbling and every ally bending the knee, there was no hiding from the truth. Humanity's Special Forces were real, and they were the silent hammer that shattered empires without mercy. The last great power to resist Earth stood in the center of the galaxy, the Oryx Dominion. For centuries, the Oryx had ruled with iron, claws and endless fleets. Their worlds stretched across 100 systems. Their soldiers were bred for war, their admirals proud and ruthless. They had crushed rebellions, burned colonies, and strangled rivals. They had believed they would outlast even humanity, but fear had rotted them from within. Whispers of shadows walked their cities. Soldiers claimed to hear footsteps in the dark when no one was near. Admirals refused to board their own ships. Civilian populations rioted, demanding surrender before the ghosts came for them. Every world watched as the Dominion trembled. At last, the High Emperor declared the galaxy's most desperate words: "We will make our last stand." The Dominion gathered everything it had: 3,000 warships, armored legions, fortress worlds, bristling with cannons. They promised their people that the Special Forces could not stand against overwhelming strength. If shadows came, they would be burned away by fire. If Earth advanced, it would break upon their walls. It was the last stand of a fading empire. The battle began at the Dominion's outer rim, in a system fortified with mines, gun platforms, and planetary shields. Human fleets arrived not with overwhelming numbers, but with silence. No challenge, no declaration, just black ships sliding out of the void. The Oryx opened fire. Thousands of cannons spat energy, missiles streaked through the dark, and the sky became fire. For a moment, the Dominion cheered. For a moment, they believed. Then the shadows moved. On board the Oryx ships, alarms screamed as corridors went dark. Soldiers ran, only to find their commanders missing, their engines sabotaged, their weapons locked. Entire ships fell silent without a shot exchanged. The Oryx fired blindly, hitting their own fleets as confusion spread. In the chaos, human vessels cut through like knives, precise and merciless. On the fortress worlds, defenders stood ready. But when the bombardment came, it was not fire from orbit, it was whispers inside their own bunkers, doors sealed shut from within. Ammunition vanished, defense grids turned against their operators. And in the smoke-filled tunnels, black-armored figures walked unseen, leaving only silence behind. The Dominion's Grand Admirals tried to rally their fleets. They sent messages to every ship. "Fight! Do not fear ghosts!" But before their voices could reach the soldiers, their transmissions were cut and replaced by static. Some swore they heard voices in that static, calm human voices, whispering, "It's over." One by one, Dominion worlds surrendered without orders. Entire fleets powered down their weapons. Generals abandoned their posts. The great war machine of the Oryx collapsed under the weight of its own terror. At the very end, the High Emperor stood alone in his throne chamber, surrounded by guards who refused to fight. He raised his staff and declared, "We will never bow to shadows." But when the lights flickered and the chamber grew cold, even he fell silent. His guards vanished one by one, until only the Emperor remained. Some say the shadows came for him that night. Others say he fled into the void, never to be seen again. The Dominion was gone. The last great empire had fallen, not to endless fleets, not to crushing armies, but to whispers, to fear, to the unseen hand of Earth's special forces. And as news spread across the galaxy, no one celebrated. No one dared. For every empire, every council, every soldier now knew the truth. There was nowhere to run. If Earth wanted victory, they would take it. If the special forces came, no wall, no fleet, no empire could stop them. The galaxy had seen its last stand, and it had ended in silence. The galaxy was quiet. Too quiet. Not because wars had ended, not because peace had finally taken hold, but because no one dared to move against Earth. The fall of the Oryx Dominion had been the last scream of resistance. When their empire crumbled into silence, the rest of the galaxy finally understood the truth. Humanity did not conquer with numbers, with fleets, or with speeches. Humanity conquered with shadows. Stories spread faster than any warship. In the marketplaces of distant colonies, merchants told hushed tales of black-armored figures who could walk through walls and silence entire armies without a single shot fired. In the academies of proud empires, instructors taught their cadets about Earth's wars, but none dared to utter the words "special forces" aloud. Even in the most powerful councils, leaders lowered their voices when discussing humanity, afraid that the shadows might be listening. No one had ever seen a special forces army. No one even knew how many existed. Some whispered that there were only a handful. Others swore entire divisions waited on hidden worlds. But numbers no longer mattered. Their legend was enough. The galaxy was no longer fighting flesh and blood. It was fighting belief, and belief was undefeated. On a frontier world, a child asked her father why their empire had surrendered to Earth without a fight. The father did not speak of fleets, or politics, or broken treaties. He simply said, "Because the shadows are already here." And the child, though she never saw them, believed. That was enough. The galaxy began to reshape itself around the silence of humanity's will. Fleets that once patrolled borders now turned inward, defending only their own skies. Empires that once dreamed of conquest abandoned those dreams. Colonies, once proud of their independence, signed treaties with Earth in the hope of safety. And through it all, the humans never needed to raise their voices. They did not boast. They did not threaten. They simply waited, and the waiting was enough. The special forces became more than soldiers. They became myth. They were the shadow in every corner, the whisper in every council chamber, the fear that kept admirals awake at night. Some believed they were not even human anymore, but something else, beings forged from Earth's endless wars, living nightmares given form. Others said they were just soldiers, but soldiers who had learned to master the one weapon no empire had ever understood: fear itself. In time, the galaxy would not remember the battles. They would not remember the fleets burned or the worlds surrendered. They would only remember the silence that came before the fall of every empire, the silence in which the shadows walked. And somewhere, far from the galaxy's trembling eyes, the special forces trained still. In hidden places, in endless trials, new shadows were forged, waiting for the moment they would be needed again. Humanity did not release them often. They were not weapons of war. They were reminders. Reminders that humanity had not only survived the death world of Earth, they had learned to turn that survival into power. The galaxy feared human soldiers, but the special forces were more than soldiers. They were the darkness between stars, the silence before surrender, the reason entire civilizations bent without a fight. They were the shadows of humanity, and the galaxy knew they would never escape them.